Hey, welcome back. This is Ron with our next lesson in our ongoing series of buying and selling houses lessons. And I thought on this one we would do one on when do I take title subject to and when do I lease option, because we get a lot of questions on that. I guess first I better tell you what subject to means for those of you watching that don't know. For a lot of years now, we've been getting for sale by owner FSBOs to call us. And when they call us, we get the property information sheet filled out that you can find right here on your Gold Club site. And when that property information sheet comes to us, it tells us what the seller owes on it and what their monthly payment is and whether they're current or in arrears. Well, there are times when I'd rather buy the property rather than lease optioning it. Lately, there's been a lot of discussion about lease optioning, but honestly, I'd much rather own it, but only if the conditions are right. So, there's nothing stopping that seller from transferring ownership of that property to you, and that would be what we call taking title subject to the underlying loan. I'm not assuming the loan. I'm going to make payments on the loan. I'm not under any legal obligation to do so. The seller is clearly aware that I'm going to take title to the property and start making payments when they agree that I start, but that I'm not assuming their loan. So don't confuse this with assuming a loan now. Assuming means you got to go down and apply to the bank, have them check your credit, fill out an application, and have them approve you. If you do that, it's the same as if you went down and originated a loan. You're just as liable. We're not doing that. We never do that. No exceptions. However, taking over a loan subject to needs no one's permission but the seller's and yours. If the seller is willing to give you the house and let you take over the debt for what's owed on it, there are many times when you're going to want to do that. So the purpose of this video is to determine when those times are. Now look, if someone deeds you the house and leave the loan in their own name, and I've only had about 600 of them do it to date, and I've got students all over North America doing it as we sit here, that means that you own the house. Please don't confuse that with a lease option. Let me just make that real clear here. I have a couple pieces of paper. Let's say this piece of paper is a mortgage or a deed of trust, and this is a deed. Actually, they're just blank papers, but let's assume here for a minute. This is a mortgage, and this is a deed. Okay? The mortgage is a lien against the property. A deed is the instrument that transfers ownership of the property. The deed is what the seller signs and hands to the attorney, and when that seller signs that deed to you, your land trust, or your LLC, and hands it to the attorney, title has transferred. The seller no longer owns the property. This mortgage, however, the lien against the property, the debt, does not go away just because the seller deeds me the property. I wish that were true. That'd be kind of nice if the mortgage went away every time title transferred, but it doesn't. So this mortgage is still stuck to this property even though the title has transferred. And nothing can stop that seller from deeding me that property except the seller or me. I do not need to assume the loan. I do not need to get the lender's permission. I do not need to even notify the lender that we're doing it. And if I did, the lender could not stop that transfer. They have the right to call the loan due. They do not have the right to prevent the sale. So the question always is, will they call the loan due? And the answer is, I don't know. They haven't on the last 600 of them I've done, but maybe on your first one they will because it's you. They don't want houses, they want payments. So as long as somebody's making the payment, and I'm not going to take the deed unless somebody's making a payment, meaning me, so they get what they want. They get monthly payments. So when do I take the deed and when do I lease purchase? Well, here's some simple guidelines. If I take the deed to the property, first of all, I have to pay closing costs. Now in some states that's not a big deal. In some states that's a really big deal. For example, if you live in Maryland, your transfer tax is about 3% of the sales price. So, if in Maryland I'm taking title to a $300,000 house, there goes $9,000 right there in part of the closing cost. I'm going to be very reluctant to take title to the property. And if I do, I'm going to need a lot of equity to make me want to write a check just for the closing costs. In some other states, for example, like, I don't know, Georgia, there's almost no transfer tax. So the cost of me taking title to the property is a very small amount compared to what it is in some of the other states. So where you live will determine the size of your closing costs, and you're just going to have to ask a title company, another investor, or an attorney what that is where you live. And that's one factor. That's one factor. Another factor is when I want, if I take title to a property and I pay the closing costs, even though I do not guarantee the debt, I'm not guaranteeing the debt under no circumstances. I did agree with the seller that I'd start making payments whenever we agreed that I would start. In my case, usually that's about 3 months after I take title. It's a condition of the purchase. However, when I take title, I feel morally obligated to make sure that payment is made, and I've got to pay the closing cost. So I am not going to do that unless I get some equity in the deal. And how much equity? That's totally in the eye of the beholder. If I'm buying a $200,000 house and I'm getting some spread in there, let's say they owe 178 on it, I might go ahead and take title to it as long as the payment is reasonable. Let's take that same example, $178,000 loan on it, but now I got a $1,500 a month payment. I'm not going to be really excited about it. There's not enough equity to make me want to take over that payment when I know the market is not going to pay me any more per month than I'm getting on that payment. So in a nutshell, the more equity I get, the more I'm willing to take over the deed, take over the title, as long as the seller is willing to transfer it to me if I give them that option. The more monthly spread I can get, the more I'm willing to take it over, but I must have equity. I will not take a deed subject to unless I have equity and I know I can get some monthly spread and I got a house that I think is sellable. The more equity, the more I'd like to own it. The less equity, the less I'd like to own it, and I switch into the lease option mode. The bigger the spread, the more I want to own it. The larger, smaller the spread, the less I want to own it, and I switch into the lease option mode, or I just whack it completely. I will tell you that owning it puts you in total control. There are big advantages to owning it. Plus you get to depreciate it. When that seller deeds you that property, you own it. You get to depreciate it from that day forward. You get to write off the interest payments that you make on the loan. Even though the loan is not in your name, you get to write them off because you're paying them. When I own it, I never have to worry about what the seller is going to do. I never need the seller's signature or permission to do anything from that day forward. I can pay that loan off anytime I want to pay it off. I don't need the seller's permission. I don't need to sign anything. However, when I lease purchase it from the seller, sooner or later I'm going to have to get them to sign that deed. I get no depreciation. Even though I control the property, I still have less control over it than I do if I own it. So if I own it, I'm in total control. If I lease option it, I'm in control as long as the seller doesn't give me a hard time and create a problem for me. So if I have a reason to buy it, I'm going to buy it. I'll take over the debt subject to. Now I live in Florida. My transfer tax here is $7 per thousand. So if I'm taking over a $200,000 loan, I got $1,400 worth of closing costs, plus a title search, plus an attorney's fee. Plus I got a thing here called intangible tax, which is about another $3.20 a thousand. So if I take my $7 a thousand and my $3.20 a thousand on the debt, which is my purchase price, and I'm taking over 200 grand, then I got what, about $2,000 worth of closing costs right there, plus my attorney's fee and my title search. If I'm willing to pay the $2,000 or the $2,500 or whatever it is because I'm getting a bunch of equity, I'd rather take title to it as long as the seller is willing to deed it to me and leave the loan in their own name. If I'm not, I don't see enough reason, then I'll lease option it. Because guys, lease options, there are no closing costs because there's no title that transferred. Plus the lender cannot call the loan due because it didn't transfer. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both. And I hope that helps you kind of get more clarity on when you want to do either of those two. See you on the next lesson.